Hey there, super friends. It's Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Monday, September 9th, 2019. Audio quality on the last one, wasn't great, but never is. Didn't seem really any worse than it used to be, so we're gonna call it a win and keep on moving. That's really fucking weird. There was no traffic from that direction, but okay. I'm just gonna take it as a win and keep going. So, this topic's a little bit overdue, I suppose, because the change happened a little bit ago. But B&R Announcement. Oh, no, it's my turn. I have an arrow. Okay, so Hogak was a really problematic card. I think it's very difficult to deny at this point that that card wasn't designed particularly well. There's nobody who looked at that card and went, oh, I can't tap lands to pay for it? No, nobody planned on doing that to begin with. Then you give him trample, and then you let, the player cast him from the graveyard. Like, there's just so much power going on there. It was too much. But, these things happen. It's like when, your players in your role-playing game keep just kind of dismissing everything you throw at them, and then, you accidentally wipe the entire party because you just went a little too hard. It sucks that they had to ban the card so soon after Modern Horizons released, but I understand why they went for Hogak this time, because they did try a half measure before. The ban Bridge from Below to kind of slow it down, and it just kind of came back bigger and stronger. Like, you could have theoretically banned, Stitcher's Supplier, and that might have slowed it down, but then they might have just found a different way to do it. I don't know. I think the card Hogak was problematic. Also, making the two-colored requirement being hybrid instead of, a black and a green, at least forcing, specific colors. I don't know. That card was definitely kind of egregious. But, so that ban, I'm down with that. I didn't get to see it much on coverage. I only played against it once, and the guy rolled me game 1, but then games 2 and 3, turn 1 Grafdigger's Cage into turn 2 Ariak Champion, and that was that. So, the post-board games with humans was, fine against it, but I also can't say that my one experience playing against it is an adequate sample size to say, oh no, that deck wasn't broken, I took care of it just fine. I did get really lucky in games 2 and 3. Grafdigger's Cage is a 2 of in the board, and Ariak Champion's a 3 of, and I did side in the 1 of Anafenza, and I even got her, let's say, game 2, but she got Thoughtseized or Inquisitioned out. So, I hit my sideboard hate cards for the deck, as soon as I could possibly play them. So, that definitely made a big difference, and, I'm not always that lucky. And maybe he got really unlucky. I think it was game 2, the Grafdigger's Cage stayed on the battlefield until the end, but once I got the Ariak Champion down, I think we went through, one more turn cycle before he was like, nope, didn't find an answer, let's just move on. I don't really know what answer that deck has for Ariak Champion, being that all of their removal is black or red, but but then game 3, he did finally get the Grafdigger's Cage off the table, but by that point, he could have even cast the Hogak and it wouldn't have mattered. Because I had chipped in so much damage with the Ariak Champion and gained so much life from my own creature playing, and his creatures entering the battlefield, that, I could take probably 3 hits from Hogak before I was even in the danger zone. Oh, Archer. Anyway, so it was so inconsequential by the time he removed it. That game was just over. So, he probably got a little bit unlucky there that he didn't find a trophy sooner in either game to take out the Grafdigger's Cage, which in and of itself really hindered his total game plan. And I got really lucky being able to get sideboard down right away. So, again, I can't say, like, oh, yeah, I had no problem dealing with this deck in the one match I played against it, and say that means that it was fine. The card's pretty busted. I think we can all agree there. Stoneforge unbanning. I think Stoneforge Mystic is a fine Magic the Gathering card. Probably even a good Magic the Gathering card. I don't think it's the be-all, end-all. I was one of those people that when they announced the unbanning of Jace the Mind Sculptor, I was like, fan-frickin-tastic. The Boogeyman that had to be preemptively banned in Modern because of the ruckus he made in Standard. And now you're just going to let him loose and destroy this goddamn format. And then you're going to, hesitate to re-ban him because, you just used him to sell a bunch of boxes of a not fantastic Master set. And then he ended up being kind of meh. And Bloodbraid Elf. Everybody was super excited about that, and everybody was, jamming that in anything they could for a hot minute. And you still see Bloodbraid Elves. Jund plays some number of them. But it's not in any deck that runs red and green, auto-include. Goyf's pretty much an auto-include in green. Skoos. Those kinds of cards. It's a good card in the right deck. But in a lot of decks, it's just kind of mopey at best. And it's the same thing with Jace. And even him, I guess he made blue-white control stronger, but not oppressive. I think Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, did more for blue-white control than Jace does. I also don't play control, so if I'm wrong there or you feel that I'm wrong, you can feel free to express that, but understand I'm just kind of going by what I see you strange blue mages do. So I think introducing for the first time, Stoneforge Mystic to the format, I'm sure there are people that are afraid she's going to take over, and I'm sure for a minute she did. Does sound like there were a lot of Stoneforge decks running around recent Modern tournaments because, everybody's really excited about that, having this card available, and, she's really good. But I think she'll end up seeing play in, maybe one or two different decks in the Modern format, tier decks. And she'll be an asset to those decks, but not, overwhelmingly busted. Not a fan of the Faithless Looting ban. Now, this is as, one, a player who doesn't play Faithless Looting. Two, a player who just always did really shitty against Phoenix. Though, never really had much of a problem with Dredge. Pyromancer, I don't think I was playing that matchup right. I haven't, my score against Pyromancer isn't great for, the one player that plays it at the shop, or did play it before his deck got destroyed. But I'd only played against him a few times, and, it's not a deck you see all that often. You see it spring up and take some surprise wins every once in a while when the format turns in just such a way that, some player out there that's better than me says, would do really good in this meta. Fucking Mardu Pyromancer. And they bust it out and they go run Rampage all over a tournament because, the tournament the format has turned in such a way that the hate cards that are very effective against young Pyromancer just aren't on anybody's radar because of the general meta. And it does well. But it never seems to stay in Tier 1 for very long. So, I didn't have a lot of experience playing against it, and I think that's a large part of, I think I was misplaying. I just can't identify what I was doing wrong because I didn't have enough experience with the matchup. But I think the Faithless Looting ban an overreach. If you wanted to sledge the knees on, is it Phoenix? Like, if that was the problem deck that they're like, well, we have to preemptively deal with this because otherwise, once we take Hogak out of the meta, it's just going to be all Phoenix all the time. You could ban Thing in the ice, and you're not doing collateral damage to other decks. And, you know, last I saw, Mono Red Phoenix was kind of iffy. It seemed to do better in the Hogak-based meta, but it wasn't near as potent as Is It Phoenix. There's also Manamorphose, but then, again, if you ban Manamorphose, you're doing collateral damage to other decks. So that's not great. It just seems like... Now, Dredge, at one point... I don't remember how long ago. The time's slippery. Like, maybe 2 years ago, I think, is when Golgari Grave Troll got banned from it, because it had sprung up and dominated the format for long enough that somebody felt it needed dealt with. I was just kind of getting into Modern at that point, so don't really have much of an opinion on whether or not the Grave Troll ban needed to happen or not. Todd Anderson insisted it did, and I generally think of Todd as a pretty good player with a pretty good eye on the format, so we'll just go with, yeah, it did. So, Dredge has been a problem in the past, and it did require dealing with before, or that seems to be what happened. So, fine, but the thing is then Dredge hung around, and again, it's one of those decks, you see it pop up when the meta shifts in such a way that, like, graveyard decks just aren't on anybody's radar, so they're like, yeah, nobody's running Graveyard Hate? Sweet. I'm just gonna go in on Dredge. Yeah, that's great. Creeping Chill did do a lot of service to that deck, because you figure you can cause a 24-point life swing. Yeah, 24-point life swing, sorry. It's been a long day. Over the course of a game if you hit all four. But, should I keep going over? Are you going to try to kill me again? So, okay, yeah, that's kind of a big deal, but, you know, you're dealing 12 points of damage to your opponent. That's not 20. And you're gaining 12 life, which I think is what is actually the more harmful part for your opponent of that equation. Like, taking 12 damage over the course of a game from these mill shots, alright, fine. And you're getting harder to kill at the same time. But even still, like, I don't think it really pushed Dredge into the, oh my god, this deck is so busted zone. It's just, the wheel of Modern turns and turns and turns, you know. You can still completely shut Dredge down with Leyline of the Void or Rest in Peace. You can do a lot of damage to it with Grafdigger's Cage. You can't straight shut it down, but you can do a lot of damage. And, like, On Offense is really good against that deck. So, I don't see the need to weaken Dredge. I definitely don't see the need to weaken Pyromancer. But, I don't know, the looting ban just seems like an overreach. I'm not a fan personally. Because it, like, yeah, it's really good for graveyard synergies. But it's only good for one kind of deck. And the thing is what warrants bans seems to be really vague. Like, when they banned Smuggler's Copter in Standard, it was like, oh, well, you know, they're in, like, every deck. Well, right, every deck has access to it because it's a colorless card. Well, I guess every deck with creatures that could crew it. And that was the weird thing, is they banned Smuggler's Copter and they followed up with Heart of Kirin that can be fucking crewed by Planeswalkers. So now you don't even need creatures to crew this thing, and you can throw it in any deck. And then we look at cards like Faithless Looting, and it's like, well, it only benefits one strategy, you see. And, it creates this uneven state. And I'm like, so is the problem that everybody can use it, or that only some people can use it? Also, I will point out that around the era of the Smuggler's Captor ban, Gideon Ally of Zendikar was continuously warping standard. The only decks that were doing well were like White X, because then you could play Gideon Ally of Zendikar. And then only strong white decks, because if I remember correctly, he does have double white cost, could play him. And it doesn't make sense to me what the guidelines for a ban are. Because, Phoenix could do the thing where it, turn 2 drops 3 Phoenixes into the battlefield, and that's about all she wrote. I don't think it was terribly consistent that it did that, though. Either that, or, the handful of players that I played against that were running that deck were just, had the worst luck ever. I don't know. I also don't think the format got enough time to adjust to Phoenix before Hogak came and stomped all over everybody's party. Because it seems to be that anymore, if you see 3 of the same deck in the top 8, it only takes one event anymore before everybody starts yelling for something to be banned from it. And Modern is in general a self-correcting format. I talk about the Wheel of Modern because that's kind of how it goes. Is certain decks sit up on top and, are the bullies of the format until everybody adjusts their sideboard to deal with that strategy. And then those decks fall from grace and something else bubbles up to be the bully of the format. I remember when I was like, I'm going to totally play Red Green Tron, and having people tell me how fucking bad this deck was. Even my good buddy Scathe, he's like, I think Aliantrazi is a fantastic player that plays awful decks. That deck is bad. And then Tron became the bully of the format. Right? And it's still kind of a meme to hate on Tron for no real discernible reason. Eldrazi Tron's the whole different beast from, straight Tron. But even Eldrazi Tron, there's plenty of hate for it. And, I remember when Humans was having its, moment in the sun where it was, the bulk of the top of the format, and people were calling for a ban in that. And then what happened? The format adjusted, it changed, it shifted. Humans is still a tier 1 deck, but it's not, the be-all, end-all bully of the format anymore. And just too often, and that's, I think, why a lot of times when I see people calling for a ban in a deck I'm not terribly familiar with, I can't just immediately get on board and be like, wow, this must be bad. Because so many people want so much ban just because it negates their strategy. Stay the hell in your lane. Oh my god. No, don't look at your passenger and talk. Look forward. You're driving. Sorry. That, even when KCI became the scariness. At first I'm like, I don't know, I think I need to see more data before I just hop on board with this. And KCI seemed pretty fucking awful. But you can't just hop on it anymore. But I also allowed people to convince me to put goddamn Militia Bugler in Humans. And god, that card was so bad in that deck. I remember when it was spoiled, husband looks at it and goes, oh, you're going to want this for Humans. And I was like, no. It goes to your hand. It's kind of worthless to me. It's too slow in Modern. It's a 3-drop that has less power than its mana cost, which, in general, Thalia's Lieutenant does technically have less power on her than her mana cost, but she, if all has gone as planned, adds more power to the board than her mana cost with her ETB. But in general, having a non-utility creature have less power than its mana cost is kind of shitty. Vigilance is, it's one of the things that makes Manus Rider appealing, but if they remove that keyword from Manus Rider, it would still be an all-star card. It's the haste and the flying that really make it good, that allow you to steal games back after your board's been wiped, or, chip in that last couple points of damage after the board stall is in full effect, or whatever. And, okay, it gets anything but Mantis Rider. And, yeah, if you whiff and your 4 cards are some combination of lands and Aether Vials, by the time you put out a Militia Bugler, you're just as happy to put them on the bottom of your library, not spend the next 4 turns drawing them. It's when it's like 2 Mantis Riders, a land and an Aether Vial, or even any other creature, like a creature you can actually take, having to throw those Mantis Riders on the bottom of your library is just fucking irritating. But I allowed myself to be conned into throwing him in the deck, and it did make sideboarding a little easier, because every time I sideboarded, I'm like, well, what 2 cards do I need from my board so I can take out these shitty freaking Militia Buglers? They were only good as a response to board wipes. And even there, I feel like they were a little more mediocre than good. Better than a Reflector Mage in that game state. Not as good as a Mantis Rider, which you will be throwing on the bottom of your library. So, I think too much. One person whose opinion that we like and respect, and, you know, it's understandable, says something, and then just people blindly hop on board with it. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm all wrong. Something you gotta kind of keep in mind is I'm an F&M hero. I play at my local shop. Every once in a while wander off to a bigger tournament, but I'm not a grinder, so my perception of these things is definitely skewed from that aspect, that I'm not playing in this larger global meta. Maybe Faithless Looting decks are, you know, more present out there in the wild, and I'm just not seeing them at my local place. Or I'm not seeing the super busted builds with them or whatever. But Faithless Looting to me definitely seems like an overreach. It's been in Modern almost since Modern's been a thing, without really being a problem. I mean, I want to compare it to Serum Visions, but I do understand how these things are different, being that you generally play Faithless Looting in a graveyard-centric deck, so you're just adding them to hand B, like whatever you discard. But in a lot of ways, it is pretty similar to Serum Visions. 1 CMC, sorcery speed, handle a total of 3 cards. Now, maybe if you rummaged with looting instead of looted, maybe if we got a faithless rummaging, where you discard 2 cards first as an additional cost to playing the spell. Are we more happy with that? Would that work better, or would you still think that that's too busted? I don't know. Seriously, let me know, because it just seems like a weird ban to me. It seems like an unnecessary ban to me. I mean, if I had my way, every single counterspell would be banned, but that's why I play a deck with Cavern of Souls. I hate counterspells. I especially hate counterspells that do other shit. You already got to tell me no. Why you gotta gain 3 life, too? I'm trying to think of anything else I had. So I'm almost home, so I don't want to get too deep into anything else, but that's really all I had to say about the B&Rs. I guess, probably going to try to go over some Eldraine spoilers tomorrow. I did the Eldraine Brawl event. I suck at Brawl. Like, I am awful at Brawl. I finally completed the ladder. Finally. On the back of the Fairy deck. The Fairy deck seems to be the most powerful of the 4? Yeah, I think it was all 4 of the color wedges. Of the 4 Brawl decks. Wait, are there more than 4 color wedges? I think there might be. I don't know. Anyway, out of the 4 Brawl decks, I think the Fairies was the best engineered. Because, Angelic Exaltation, anything that makes that card playable makes me happy. Reminds me of the days of Sublime Archangel. I love that card. It was such a bad card, but God, did I love that card. The TLDR, I guess, on my thoughts on Eldraine. I really love the flavor of the set. I really enjoy the artwork of the set. The initial spoilers were a little underwhelming. You know, you finally bring Garruk back after all this time, and he doesn't feel great. And maybe I'm just not looking at him right. Maybe I'm not seeing his potential. But, you know, I look back on Apex Predator, and I'm like, and this is the new and improved Garruk? Ew. But Apex Predator was pretty badass. I mean, he was an Apex Predator. It's in the name. But there were more spoilers today that definitely looked more interesting. And getting to play with some of the cards in the Brawl event, which, again, like, I don't play much Commander either. Or really any. So maybe it's something about how you play that type of format. I used to play with my buddy's Singleton deck, like, all the time. It was just a Singleton deck, though. There was no Commander. I don't think he limited the lands. Maybe he did. I don't remember. It's been ages. Of course, back then, you know, it was before I played, like, competitive decks and stuff, and I only really played for funsies, so maybe it's that I've been warped in all this time playing, you know, decks stocked with 4-ofs. But yeah, no, I was really, really bad at Brawl. But the Fairy deck was very, very good. So, getting to play with them, my opinion has changed slightly. I don't like this adventure mechanic. But honestly, the big thing is, I don't like things that continue to make the Exile Zone graveyard be. Back in my day, get off my lawn, don't make me get the broom. Exile meant, like, legitimately removed from the game. That was it. That card was done interacting with that game of Magic. And, you know, now we're putting counters on shit in the Exile Zone. That was somebody's suggestion, like, oh, well, you know, it should get exiled with an adventure counter. And I'm like, no more putting counters on shit in Exile. No. Yeah, I don't like crap that manipulates the Exile Zone. I like when the Exile Zone is just gone. It is, you know, technically a zone in the game, but really it's the zone outside the game. But maybe I just need to get over that. Looks like some neat new tokens to make this set, which will be nice because Inktober is coming up, and I've come up with a prompt list of 31 Magic the Gathering tokens that you can create your own versions of for Inktober. If anybody's interested in that, you feel free to email me, lastpointgaming@gmail.com, or hit me up on Twitter @StrangerSparrow, and I will share the list with you. I did tweet it out, but I haven't, like, pinned it or anything, so if you haven't been following me, it might be a little hard to find, but I am happy to share it with anybody else that wants to partake in that. There's some neat things. I think it will definitely have an impact because, you know, it's going to spawn the rotation, so that's going to really throw the format on its head. But a lot of the cards that were spoiled in the first run of cards I got to see looked very underwhelming. But again, you know, the first spoilers are usually kind of so. But with all that said, I'm home. So as always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I'll get to talk to y'all at least one other time this week. Hopefully more.